in the African dream. This is Oral Ofori. I'll tell you a little bit about myself. My name is Oral Ofori. I'm a blogger. My blog is www.oralofori.com. www.oralofori.com. That's where it's going down. We talk about happenings in Ghana. We talk about happenings in the States, in London, in Europe, wherever. We're trying to represent the African dream from the African way. You know, we try to tell the African story according to the African from an African perspective. Make sure you click to www.oralofori.com and hear about what is happening in the African community. If you have anything that you want us to cover for you, feel free to send us an email. But before you do that, make sure to tune into the African dream, representing the African and the Ghanaian community out here in the state, keeping it down for Africa, living the African dream.
Welcome to another edition of your 30-minute chat show called The African Dream. I am Oral Ofori, your host and producer. Today's program is a concluding part of our earlier chat with Jemila Abdulai. Jemila joins us via Google Hangouts from Tunisia, where she works as a junior consultant with the African Development Bank. Our guest today is very passionate about Africa, as those of you who watched the first edition of my chat with her might be aware by now. If you didn't see that earlier show, feel free to send us an email using the address contact@oralofori.com, and we will gladly share the video of it with you. Ms. Abdulai sees herself as a creative person who is a problem solver with an analytical mind and a multicultural perspective. She is also very passionate about media, communication, women, youth, and African development. In the first quarter of 2013, she was adjudged the best citizen journalism and news blogger in Ghana by Blogging Ghana. Blogging Ghana is the official mouthpiece for bloggers of Ghanaian origin worldwide. While praising social media for the power it has to bridge information gaps and bring people together across the world, Jemila tells me that she feels most of Africa is far behind the ICT curve. The lack of constant or at least regular supply of electricity and internet connectivity is not helping the situation in most African countries, including her home country of Ghana. Our guest believes social media, like anything else, has its associated negatives. Some of the major ones that will negatively impact on countries in Africa as more and more people become users of this technology include infrastructural constraints like little or no access to electricity, computers, and/or poor internet connectivity, among others. Other related difficulties hindering access to the internet besides cost include the lack of skills required to maximize social media usage beneficially, and creditability of information obtained from social media enthusiasts and websites. The problem of identity theft and child pornography are also concerns that leave Jemila worried. Our guest finished a Master's of Arts in International Economics and International Affairs with the Johns Hopkins University Paul H. Nitz School of Advanced International Studies in Washington, D.C. She also did some studying in Italy. The well-traveled young Ghanaian lover of words, who also speaks fluent French, tells this show that she is working hard with the support of her partners to put together a communications consultancy. That consultancy hopes to offer basic services to help people improve upon their writing and basic communication skills. This is just one of the few ways she intends to give back to society after all the good things she believes she now is privileged to have, because, in her opinion, it is such a blessing to be alive and have friends and family that look out for your well-being. On the show today, you will see Jemila talk about her recent travel to the African nation of Rwanda, the impact that trip had on her, and her admiration for the people of that country. She also shed some light on matters of interest in her home country of Ghana and the deadly Ebola virus and how it is affecting human relations globally. We also get to find out about Wiyala from Jemila, a Ghanaian songstress who is a personal favorite of our guest. Enjoy the show, and as always, thanks for watching and letting us hear from you. We appreciate all your emails. Let us now get to hear from Jemila herself. Thank you. Now let's talk about a trip Jemila recently embarked on to the African country of Rwanda, which suffered a gruesome genocide that lasted about 100 days in 1994, where approximately over 500,000 people were killed. What was that trip of yours about, Jemila?
So the trip was actually work related. So I was there on mission. But whenever I do have the opportunity to go anywhere, for me, it's always a question of trying to get a sense of the place or trying to get a sense of what people who live there or people who are from there think about their country or their city and how that ties into, the larger scheme of global affairs or African affairs. I must say that I was totally sold on Rwanda. And Rwanda's story, for me, it's a story of courage, really. Courage because, as you mentioned, they did go through a very difficult situation, and difficult is an understatement, I'm sure. They went through a very challenging time, not just one or two people, but as a nation. And to be able to rebuild from that, to be able to move from that in the space of 20 years, and I mean, they're miles ahead of Ghana. They're miles ahead of Senegal. Well, all of the African countries I've been to, probably with the exception of Tunisia, depending on what you're looking at. How they were able to do that for me is a story of courage, because this is a country where literally the international community turned their back. So all of the usual support you would expect to have from, the UN, World Bank, IMF, all of them, and by extension, most of us, all turned our backs on the country. But what they did, and all of this is based off of discussions I had while I was there, what they did was they realized that at the end of the day, it boils down to them. They could be receiving grants, they could have foreign investors coming in, but if they didn't come up with a vision, come up with goals, and work towards that, there was no way they were going to succeed. One of the people I spoke to, she put it most eloquently. She said, before the genocide, we realized our common enemy was within ourselves. So we were fighting each other. We didn't really have a sense of identity as a nation. By the time the genocide was over and people had to start healing, we realized that our common enemy was not within us, meaning everybody who had turned their back on them essentially helped them realize that it came down to them. They had to pull themselves out of that situation. I mean, they had help from countries like Ghana, but ultimately it came down to them. Hearing stories about people who, one neighbor who maybe killed or murdered someone right next door, and then having to go to prison and seeing this person and saying, "Hi, how are you doing?" Like, for me, that just blew my mind. It was like, I wonder if that could ever happen in Ghana. Not currently. It is a very telling story, about where a society can go and how they can grow from what many would regard as a insurmountable challenge. And I see Rwanda is making the news again because they asked travelers from the U.S. and Spain to be prepared to undergo screening at their airports. And I was like, of course. And this is in the context of Ebola. Of course, it's only Rwanda that's going to be able to do that because, they're the masters of their destiny. And I mean, there are people who criticize, particularly their president, Kagame, and say he's a dictator or whatever. But at the end of the day, it's like they're getting somewhere. They're making some marked improvements in their living situation and so on. And you really have to ask what the rest of us are doing. So they really redefined what was possible, and I think that also was very for me it was good motivation.
The people of Rwanda, one of the amazing, the most amazing peoples of the African continent, I believe. For a country to go through what they went through and to still be able to pick up the pieces, heal, and move on to become, what they are today is really amazing. Let's move the picture towards Ghana. which is one of the most peaceful countries in Africa today. That peace is today battling financial instability that has been making citizens of Ghana complain a lot about the state of the economy. It has also pushed Ghana into bed, with the International Monetary Fund, that's the IMF. Do you think Ghana asking the IMF for assistance again with fixing the Ghanaian economy is the best decision, or could other alternatives, have been taken, looking at the case of Rwanda in perspective, where they looked within themselves to solve the issues of difficulties that they were going through as a nation?
Oh man, this question. Do I think that it was a wise decision to ask the IMF for assistance? If I'm going to put on my economics hat, then I'll say, that's the global financial system, and the IMF does have experts, and it's probably harder to deal with some of these issues when you're in the issues, so maybe it's good to have an objective ear. So that's the economist in me talking, right? But if I'm going to talk about it as a citizen or as someone who cares about my country, no, I do not think. At this point, I honestly don't think that Ghana's issue is a financial issue. That's not what it's about anymore. It's not about that, because we've always had opportunities to access financing, or we have resources and so on, and yet we never manage it. At this point, for me, I think it's more of a values-based challenge. We claim that we want to be one of the best economies in at least West Africa. We've fallen so far, so let's just be humble in our reach right now. So let's say we want to be one of the best economies in West Africa, and yet everything we've been doing recently is quite to the contrary. So what do we actually value? Do we value, careful planning and financial management? No. Do we value, putting forth a certain face about who we are as a people or what our country is? Yes. I think there's a lot of pretense going on, and this is something that I talked about a lot. I actually took a step back from it because it's the same thing over and over. But our leadership is, I would say, a little confused, and maybe that's putting it mildly. But I don't think that they are in touch with the people, and I don't think that some people are necessarily qualified to handle the tasks that they're handling or supposedly handling, right? This question about Ghana's financial situation is something that came up, I would say, after the elections, right? And it's normal. It's normal for a developing country for the public debt to go up after an election, because you know how African countries go. That's when they're actually trying to get things done so that people can vote them back in and everything. So that's normal. But then we had the Supreme Court case, which was more, put more pressure on the national budget. And then after that, during that time, we also had all of these electricity issues. So there was a lot going on at the same time. What I would have appreciated as a Ghanaian citizen is some truth. And that's all I've been saying this whole time. And I think a lot of Ghanaians, agree with me. It almost feels like we're being taken for a ride, and not just once, but multiple times. And we're still sitting on that ride, So it's not just our leaders, it's also us. And am I calling for protest? No, that's not what I'm calling for. But really, we need to be honest with ourselves as a people about what we claim we value and where we claim we want to go and who we claim we are. This thing about us being peaceful, that's literally the first thing anybody ever says about Ghana when you're outside the country, or at least in my experience, when people come up, oh, your country is so peaceful, they're so democratic. And I'm always one to say, take a step back, the fact that we are good at PR or the fact that we refuse to address certain issues does not make us peaceful. You know, I think that it's yes, we're peaceful in the sense that we don't want to disturb the peace. That's more accurate from what it's like nobody wants to say, yes, you're the person who organized this rally or whatever, and people got angry and whatever happened. Nobody wants to be that person. But then what ends up happening is that we shut up about the things that matter. So is that being peaceful, or is that just trying not to disturb the peace? So I think we need to be more honest to ourselves. Go and look for a World Bank report. I think it's called Electrifying Ghana. It's by the Ghana team at the World Bank, and go and read that report. What it basically says is if we were to commit all of our resources to addressing the electricity issue, we would not be able to do it. So, you know, the PR can do whatever it wants, and they can keep saying, oh, by the end of the year, we're going to have electricity or whatever. But the reality is that's not the truth. So we need to start telling each other the truth. And if it means that everybody has to, you know, buckle up a bit for a difficult ride ahead, that's what we should be doing. And just to give a comparison, because you did mention in relation to Rwanda, what Rwanda did, they lost some donor partners because there were certain reports that they were involved in the DRC conflict or something of the sort. So some donor partners pulled out. At the time, most of their budget was donor funded, right? What did they do? They set up a national fund. It was called Agachiru, loosely translated, which means we value ourselves. It's called the Agachiru Development Fund. And they set up a development fund and basically said all Rwandans, whether in country or in the diaspora, because many people had left after during and after the genocide, can contribute to this fund. So you had school children contributed, ministers, old people, young people, different rural people, urban people, different people contributed. So much such that they had so much money, the newspapers had to stop publishing the figures. Just think about that for a second. Coming back to the question of values, I mean, the name of the fund says it themselves. We value ourselves. And they really did, because they put their money where their mouth was. Ghana does the opposite. So I'm just going to leave that hanging. You can make your own deductions.
There's a lot of talk and little action. I myself am very passionate about Ghana, and I live outside of the country, and I'm always interested in seeing what is going on, and I try to keep up to speed with news development, especially with regards to what the country is doing to help sustain the economy. But just like you said, sometimes it's not solely the responsibility of the government in place, but also obviously the people. Ghanaians as a people really need to realize that it is their responsibility to make sure that the governments they elect is not just helping to achieve the electoral promises that they make, but it's also being accountable to them. And the only way they can do that is for them to be accountable to themselves. You can't expect good of someone when you are not even being good, to your own self and to your own conscience. So that's really interesting to hear you put it the way you just did. And let's move on, Jemila. One of the biggest headlines, stories across the entire globe today is the Ebola virus. What do you have to say about all the havoc this disease is causing globally?
I haven't really made public comments on Ebola because it is a very sensitive issue. And at the end of the day, the fact is, large numbers of people are dying because of or linked to the virus. Personally, I think, talking generally about Ebola first, I think that the more unfortunate thing about the virus is specifically the fact that it could negatively influence human relations. And you're already seeing it, right? You're already seeing a lot of ignorance about how the disease is spread. You're seeing a lot of profiling when it comes to West Africans, especially, not just on the continent, but I'm talking globally. And so for me, I think that looking at it from the context of, the fact that we Africans need to be, in quotes, united in order to really make an economic mark, for instance, it's really wreaking havoc in that sense, because people are becoming very mistrustful of each other. People from one country don't want to have other people from another country, and so on. That said, the threat is real. It's, despite the fact that there are many reports to the contrary that it might be a hoax and so on, and might be biological warfare and all of these things. It is still a threat, right? If you misinform, if you are misinformed, if you are, ostracizing people who might have the virus, you are contributing to the spread of it.
I know this might be a little selfish of me to ask, especially considering the fact that I'm also an African, but do you see the continent getting to that place where she does not heavily rely on foreign handouts, to develop its economy?
Long and short, right now, given current circumstances, using my country as an indicator, no. I don't know. I just, I feel like there are many things that need to be in place that aren't in place. And part of that has to do with the way we Africans think and act. And I'm using Africans very loosely. But part of it is exactly that. It's not just Ghana that's going through economic mismanagement. Different African countries have gone through that over different periods of time. And I think the sad thing, actually, is the fact that right now, even though it's not the whole continent, but right now, the past couple of years have been a period where the continent has recorded high growth levels, and there is a lot of potential and a lot of possibility. And, there are a lot of African entrepreneurs and businesses and, people who are doing things that this should happen at this time. For me, it's like at your best time, you were at your worst. That's literally what it was, at least in Ghana's case, right? So I think, again, as I said, I think I'm beginning to really think that a lot of our issues and development issues and whatnot are not just, it's not as simple as it's economic or it's financial or it's even leadership related. A lot of it is value based and what we as people claim we want and what we're willing to work towards. So I'm hopeful though. It might be dark and you probably can't see it today, but the possibilities still exist. So.
What energizes Jemila Abdulai?
What energizes? Okay, I have to sound more energetic now. What energizes me? I think friends. I enjoy interesting discussions, music, writing, of course, reading, and good food. Literally. Yeah, I think I'm most energetic when I'm in a creative space, when I'm creating and working with creators and talking to really cool peeps like yourself, and just being real about life and not just being real. Yeah.
Well, if there's any of the things you mentioned that we can provide you here on the African Dream Show right now, it'll be being good friends and also music.
Woohoo!
Introduce your favorite music on the African music scene right now, and we'll be glad to play to end out this show.
Man, you are giving me such hard questions. Okay, music. There's this song, oh my goodness. I mean, Wiala. It has to be Wiala. So Wiala is from, I think it's Upper East region of Ghana. And she has a song called Sun and Moon. And she sings in her local language, which is Sisala. And it's just a beautiful sound. And also because my favorite poet, his name is Rumi, his companion or best friend is called Shams, which means sun. And Rumi apparently loosely translates as moon. So I really like that song. It's a cool song.
Well, folks, you've been watching The African Dream today, and we have for our special guest, Jemila Abdulai. And let's end the show by playing her favorite song, Sun and Moon, by Wiala, an artist originally from Ghana. And we hope you have enjoyed the show. We look forward to having you around next edition. And Jemila Abdulai, it's always a pleasure to talk to you. We appreciate it, and we look forward to hearing more and more from you here on The African Dream.
Thank you, Oral. It's been great. And next time, take it easy on the questions. Yeah.
Will do.
Chedi